Hey there, I'm Taz Singh, and I've been working with communities for as long as I can remember. Fundamentally, communities are made up of people, so this is my journey going to those communities and talking to those people. Come along with me. Amazing. I'm back today with Ned Flanders, and so I've kind of got a chance to meet him a few weeks ago in actually Redux, Miami. So you're still wearing the shirt.
Yep.
And I got a chance to talk to him back there, and he's actually just a very interesting guy, Ned. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce all of you to, what's your actual name?
Mark Erikson.
Mark Erikson.
A very sunburnt and worn out from talking to lots of people, Mark Erikson, but hi.
Well, I'm kind of very tired and kind of burnt out myself from talking to people like Mark and everyone else for the past little while. So I guess that makes both of us.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a pleasure to kind of talk to you and kind of share that with everyone else, Mark. And so I guess like talking to you the past couple of weeks, the one thing that really surprised me was you spent time in China?
Indeed. So after I graduated from college in 2004, I went over to Beijing, China, and taught English for 4 years.
Like, what makes you want to like for me, you know, like JavaScript is enough of a language. You know what I mean? Dealing with the Chinese language and teaching them English is a whole other thing entirely. What kind of made you want to do that?
I heard the teaching program being advertised while I was in school. I think probably my sophomore year. And just something about the opportunity sounded amazing. Like I heard about it, like I want to do this after I graduate.
You went to school for computer science.
Standard comp sci degree.
And so you learned a ton of languages.
Java, Python, C++.
That's quite a few languages. And so you basically he said he wanted to go teach more people more languages, which I think is insane. So what did you learn any Chinese while you were there?
我说一点中文.
Okay, now he's just showing off. I totally understood what you just said.
I remember basically like 4 phrases at this point.
Oh wow, okay. I mean, it's 4 more phrases. I think I can do like yi,
1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8.
Exactly what he just said. So now he's just teaching me Chinese, you know, and so that's amazing. So, I have to ask, how did the whole Ned Flanders thing come up?
Entirely random. Like the funny thing is, I'm not even a Simpsons fan.
What?
But like back in like 2007 or 8, when the Simpsons movie came out, they had a flash like make your own Simpsons character thing on the website, and I made one and I saved the image and I forgot about it. And sometime later, like I was signing up for GitHub or something else, and I don't have many pictures of myself, and I didn't like want to put something up as an avatar. So I'm like, I have that Simpsons picture lying around. Let me just like crop off the upper shoulders and use that. And then like actually became a thing. In fact, my first ever conference was React Boston in 2017. And when I mentioned on Twitter leading up to it that I was going to go, there was a legitimate debate on Twitter, like how much is Mark going to look like his avatar?
Oh my God, like you're not even that big of a Simpsons fan?
No.
What? I love Simpsons. I grew up on Simpsons. Simpsons is amazing. Oh my goodness. I don't know what to think anymore.
I mean, if we go way back, like my cartoons growing up were DuckTales, Tailspin, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, Disney Afternoon.
All of those. Also, DuckTales, particularly amazing. Particularly amazing. I'm a big fan of DuckTales. It was also Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, amazing. Love that cartoon. I used to play those video games back in the day as well. But that's so awesome. Like I've learned so much about you over the past couple of weeks. And so you're telling me that, so you went to China, you taught English there, and then you went to go work at some sort of...
Northrop Grumman, government contractor.
Okay, so what were you doing there? Like, were you teaching Chinese there?
No. I started off as just yet another junior software developer. The office I was at did a lot of embedded C++.
Oh, wow.
But starting in 2009, I got reassigned to work on a project that involved some geospatial visualization tools, which is a fancy way of saying showing things on a map.
Okay.
And some other senior developers had developed some like line of sight calculation code where we could figure out like from a point on Earth, what can you see, and then draw colored splots on a map. So like I can see this side of the mountain, but not the other side.
Gotcha.
And so I ended up following some of those developers around through different projects over the next few years. And that's what eventually led me to web development.
And so this is a government contractor. So basically, by telling us, you have to kill us afterwards, right?
None of the projects I worked on were actually classified. Just
Okay, good, 'cause
internal proprietary tools.
The last thing I want on my tombstone is killed by Ned Flanders, and so okay, thank goodness. So you worked on mapping software to kind of visualize kind of line of sight from any given point on a map. That's actually really interesting. And you built that using was that C++ or what was that built in?
The backend calculation code was straight C, so it would read the train data off disk, do the calculations, output a PNG. The main UI that we built originally was with a framework called GWT, Google Web Toolkit, which was a Java to JavaScript compiler.
Yep.
We had a requirement that our backend had to be built in Java, and I had no web dev experience at the time, and this let me leverage my existing desktop experience to build a desktop feeling app in a browser.
Right. So it's just like public static void class everything. You know what I mean? The amount of ceremony.
Singletons. I had so many singletons everywhere.
Oh my goodness. I mean, the amount of okay, I'm gonna draw a weird parallel here. I'm gonna draw a really weird parallel, but bear with me, okay? So Ned Flanders, very, very religious guy, love him, amazing character. I'm gonna keep this whole Ned Flanders thing the whole time. Sorry, not sorry. A very religious guy, very into ceremony. GWT Java, very religious, very into ceremony.
Very true.
And so maybe that was the inspiration for the avatar. I don't know. I'm drawing some weird parallels here, everyone. But just bear with me. I've been kind of like in a whole different world this past month.
It's been a long week.
It's been a long week. It's been a long week. But anyway, I'm going to stop with my silliness now and listen to Mark. So you built this mapping software, GWT. GWT, it's kind of an interesting piece of technology because, as you said, it's a Java to JavaScript compiler. Oftentimes, I think of it as more of a desktop-based way of thinking about application development. Is that what you found?
Very much so. So there's the underlying compiler technology, and we were using a third-party library that provided your usual buttons and widgets and stuff. And the API was that classical object-oriented paradigm. My button equals new button dot set text click me.
Oh my goodness.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And at the time, I still thought of my data is the list items in my drop down,
right.
and I have to ask the drop down what its data is. I can still remember a couple years later, after I'd done some JavaScript and Backbone, a specific task where I felt my mental model shift to where my app is my data and my UI is driven from that data. And it was just this huge paradigm shift for me.
That's super interesting. So for me, you mentioned the magic words JavaScript and Backbone. Those are two things that I enjoy.
Yep, been there, did that.
Enjoyed for a while in my career. And I remember exactly what you're saying. Well, I mean, to be fair, Backbone provided a good structuring for your app, but you kind of had to still fill in so many different blanks within that whole paradigm.
The Backbone app that I worked on, I ended up making a lot of the decisions that drove that. And I ended up cobbling together almost literally a dozen different Backbone plugins, like better models, better views, data binding, event triggering, and it worked. And those were good choices at the time, given what I knew, given what was available in the ecosystem, and given the constraints that were available.
Yeah.
But I also found all the boundaries of what you could do with Backbone, and it was getting painful, which is why when I found React in 2015, it was it solved all the problems I was experiencing. You can compose arbitrary components together. You just pass down data as props, callback functions for data to go up.
Yeah.
It auto updates the UI with the data. This is exactly what I need to do.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. And for me, doing this whole time, you've been working on a team, of course, right? And so explaining, Backbone is one piece of the stack, but then explaining the rest of your kind of custom stack to the rest of your team was a whole thing.
I can remember. So I was lucky enough to we kind of paused, and I got to kind of go off in a corner and do my first React and Redux most of 2016, rewriting the client for the GWT app.
Oh, wow.
I was the only one on the team who knew GWT in the first place. 2017, we were resuming work on some of the Backbone code, and I was again having to introduce some of the newer developers on our team to here's our app, here's how it works, here's Backbone, here's the 12 different custom Backbone plugins that I've added, and the 5 different view subclasses. wait a minute. Team lead, can we just like use React for this? And I managed to whip up a proof of concept showing I could insert React in the middle of the backbone. And that led to its own weirdnesses, like eventually a React component or a backbone view that was not rendering HTML, was using lifecycle methods to drive the 3D globe with imperative APIs, but also reading data from the Redux store at the same time. It was stupid and hacky, but it worked. But the thing is, like, being able to use React and its flexibility, insert it in the middle of the legacy UI, and it actually still simplified things because you no longer had like these like 5 different ways to trigger events in a backbone app.
Yeah. It was more predictable, easier to reason about.
Hugely
and I would also assume easier to kind of scale across a team,
Yes.
which fundamentally matters when you're working with any team in software, right?
Absolutely.
Hopefully you're working with other people, and hopefully you can understand what you're doing. So that's all super interesting, and I guess rolling back to something that you said, like when you're working on that backbone app, that was the first time you were thinking of the UI as a representation of state. I assume that kind of translated over to your React space as well, where the React components are representation of the state and representation of the data and representation of the props, so on and so forth, that could basically result in a UI. I guess, can you talk to me more about your kind of evolution through that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I remember one specific task in particular in the spring of 2015, where for the first time I was truly designing it to be all the original data was in backbone models, all the derived data of like is a thing selected or like things like that in backbone models, automatically updating the UI. Which is why when I started looking at React a few months later for the first time, it felt so natural because it matched what I was already like. This problem was out there, and I was kind of like blindly grasping for solutions, and it turned out that React was the solution. I just didn't know it until I got there.
Right. And is that what kind of drove you towards Redux then?
Yeah, so Redux literally came out about the same time I was just starting to learn React. It was at the tail end of what I refer to as the Flux Wars, like 30 different Flux libraries created in the span of a year.
I also created my own Flux library, I'll have you know.
And you and everybody else. So mid-2015, I just began reading about React, reading the docs, reading blog posts. I found the React to Flux chat channels and just began to work. Started seeing questions I knew the answers to and would respond. Saw questions like I read a blog post about this the other day. Let me paste in the link. Started collecting lists of blog posts that I was having to paste in all the time, and that was really the start of where I began like answering questions and providing help support publicly.
Right.
And that also led to how I got involved with Redux. I was seeing the same Redux questions being asked everywhere. And in early 2016, I mostly volunteered to write an FAQ page for the Redux docs.
Okay.
And I had some free time, and I put that together over the next couple months. And Dan merged it, and he gave me commit rights.
What?
and for the next few months, like I really only felt in my head like I had permission to help triage issues and answer some questions. Dan had already been hired by that time to work on React, got busy with it, and in summer of 2016, basically handed the maintainer keys to myself and Tim Dorr and said, "Here it is, go have fun."
Wow. Okay, that's kind of crazy. So so I need to rewind this in my head a little bit. So you were just getting started with React, just getting started with Redux, which kind of came out at the same time. Representation of state within the UI is what kind of drove you towards those things, and really just by being absorbed within the community and just kind of observing kind of the natural, essentially ebb and flow of questions within the community, you obviously got involved, started answering them, and said, "Hey, this is kind of inefficient," kind of saying the same thing over and over and over again.
Yes.
What if I just commit that FAQ page to
Story of my life right there.
like to Redux itself, and through that process you kind of got involved with open source by triaging issues, by writing documentation, by just kind of observing trends within that open source community and just trying to help out and trying to like essentially contribute back. That's what got you to be a Redux maintainer.
Yeah, like it was never an intentional thing that I set out to do. Like I started answering some questions, and then I kept answering more questions, and then it became a thing.
And so there you go. I mean, if you're looking for a great way to get involved in open source, I mean, like oftentimes, essentially, open source maintainers say just start by triaging issues and writing documentation. I mean, there you go. It worked. It's not just a silly way to say go away. It actually works. Stick with it, and I mean, next thing you know, you'll be working on a really core, critical piece of infrastructure such as Redux. So, okay, so I guess going back to you, Mark. So you were handed over the maintainer keys at that point, but you mentioned you kind of had this kind of moral blocker, this kind of moral authority blocker for a little while there, where you felt limited that like you could only do issues and documentation. What changed for you to then go and actually write code and obviously influence the direction of the project?
So even after Dan sent me and Tim the message saying like, you own the project now, like it's still like even for another few months in the summer of 2016, I didn't think of myself as like a maintainer. There were a couple specific issues that came up late that summer that forced me to actually understand what was going on in our code and also like have to say this is the way it should work. One user filed a PR trying to change how actions get handled inside of Redux itself. And I pointed out that that wasn't feasible given how the API design works, but here's some other options you can do instead.
Gotcha.
And another was a user just randomly popped up and said, I've rewritten all of React Redux and I think it works better. Would you like this as a PR?
Oh my goodness.
I was obviously skeptical because who does this?
Yeah, no, like I've seen this happen to a bunch of different open source projects before, and I don't think I've ever seen any of those PRs get accepted. So how is this story going to end?
Well, so I kind of skeptically started asking, like, have you considered these different edge cases? And to my surprise, the user actually like updated the PR and applied the changes, and I realized he was serious about it. And we saw that the performance benchmarks he'd done actually showed that it really was faster than the existing version. So at that point, I'm like, this is a good idea. Let's do this. And I helped shepherd and work with that user to get the coding changes done. And we actually released that as React Redux version 5 in late 2016.
So this is a PR from just a contributor, just anyone out there, that rewrote Redux.
React Redux.
That rewrote React Redux.
Basically from scratch.
And it ended up with your guidance and with you pointing out those edge cases and them kind of collaborating with you and rewriting all those things, it ended up becoming V5.
The live production version of React Redux that existed for 2+ years, I think.
So this is the first time I've heard of a PR that's rewritten a library from scratch, basically, actually becoming the next version of the library. I've heard this story so many times from so many friends of mine, and not once have I ever heard that thing was actually merged. So that's remarkable.
I've got the receipts on the blog.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So, I mean, so you've been kind of fostering engineers and teaching and getting them to learn for quite a while now. You mentioned you have a blog. Yep. Is that what you kind of do on the blog?
Yeah, so I blog about really whatever feels interesting. The majority of it is obviously React and Redux related. One of the first things I wrote was a tutorial series inspired by the first things I'd learned writing the first React and Redux code at my day job over the course of a year. I've written a lot of the posts that I've written have been specifically in response to comments or discussions online, especially when I find myself writing the same answer a half dozen times. It's time to put the answer in one place.
It's going back to that React to Flux, going back to that FAQ.
By far the biggest example, and the two best examples I can point to, and these are the two most popular posts on my blog. I wrote one earlier last year called A Mostly Complete Guide to React Rendering Behavior. I've seen a lot of confusion with people not being sure, like, when do my components re-render? How can I optimize this? Does changing props matter at all? What about context? And so you can go back and look at my tweet history. On a random Friday, I was like, I almost feel like I need to write this blog post, but I'm going to play games. And someone's like, no, you ought to write it. I'm like, okay, fine, I'm doing this. 4 hours and 5,000 words later.
Wow.
That night.
5,000 words.
Yes.
One Friday night.
Literally.
Wow, like essentially Ned Flanders knows how to party.
Like literally, you can look at my Twitter, and I was like counting the words as I was writing.
Oh my goodness.
People have told me like that is like one of the most useful, informative resources they've ever seen.
It sounds legitimately incredibly informative.
And I've added some extra material to it over the last year and a half. It's maybe like 8,500 words by now.
Wow.
The other one, and the question that I see coming up every day still is, does context replace or kill Redux? And my standard answer to that is no. These are different tools that solve different problems.
Yeah.
Context is a tool for dependency injection. It's a tube. You put something in at the top, it comes out at the bottom. Redux is a tool for predictable state management. Now, yes, you can also use it to skip prop drilling, but it's not the thing that it's meant for.
Right.
And this question literally comes up on a daily basis even today. So basically I got fed up and I literally tried to write the definitive blog post that explains here's what these tools do, here's how they work technically, here's all the things that they're meant for, here's how they're different, here's when you should consider using this, here's when you should consider not using this. And I can tell you, looking at the blog traffic stats, that is by far my most popular post.
It sounds a lot like teaching English to a bunch of people that speak Chinese. You know,
pretty much.
It's explaining it from the ground up and really defining all the different kind of characteristics and all the different paradigms at play when you're trying to consider something that's really a whole new language in a way. So that's remarkable.
I'm a very firm believer in trying to understand like the technical and historical backgrounds of like why was this tool invented?
Yeah.
What purposes? What historical influences? What was it invented to solve? Understanding the trade-offs, and then saying, okay, here's the problem I have. Here's 5 possible tools. Given my constraints, which tool is best for the job?
I love that. I'm a firm believer in exactly this. For me personally, sometimes I hear someone say, "Oh, you can learn React in a week," and I'm just like, "Can you though?" Because kind of everything that Mark just said, it's kind of what I need to understand before considering a tool. I need to understand how the author is thinking about it, what sort of problems the author is intending to solve with it, like what paradigm does it operate within. And I find for me, I need to do kind of 3 rewrites in that technology, which ends up taking months for me to properly write enough code to understand the paradigm in which that technology operates in. Because in my opinion, I'd love to hear your opinion. In my opinion, to truly understand the technical paradigm, you need to kind of push it to the limits of that paradigm, which fundamentally requires a lot of code. Do you find the same thing, or?
Oh, a lot. Like, there's the, what is it, the S curve of technology. It's like, here's the new thing. It's awesome. Wait, we hate this thing. It's awful. Okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
And Redux went through that. Like, Redux killed off all the other Flux libraries because it was a better design.
Right.
And people began to assume if you're using React, you have to be using Redux, which resulted in Redux being shoved everywhere, including many apps that never needed it in the first place. But now you have people who are being told they have to use Redux without understanding why it exists. And then you had people being forced to learn Redux in a boot camp, like without even fully understanding JavaScript and React first.
Yeah.
Which is why you started seeing the inevitable backlash starting in like 2017 and 18.
Yeah.
People had now been using Redux enough to experience those pain points. Projects had been handed off to later teams. Other tools had started to come into the ecosystem that maybe solved some of those problems in different ways.
Right.
And now it was like this wave on Twitter, like every other week. It's like, I hate Redux, it's awful, let's kill it.
It's so true, fundamentally. I mean, yeah. So I guess like what you just mentioned, I'm curious how DevTools fits into that, because as I mentioned, for me to understand a paradigm, I need to kind of write a ton of code to be able to truly understand where that paradigm works or doesn't, and kind of know how to adapt it accordingly. A big part of that for me is tooling. Tooling obviously gives me the insights to be able to observe exactly what that tool is doing, exactly what that technology is doing, and exactly how it works. I remember, like with Redux, it was often marketed alongside DevTools, alongside kind of time travel debugging and kind of all those things. So can you talk to me more about kind of the DevTools side?
Sure. So the original reason Dan invented Redux in the first place was he wanted to give a conference talk on time travel debugging. Problem is he didn't actually have a thing that did that.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it's not wrong to say that Redux is a conference talk grown too big, but the idea was this Flux architecture pattern was already popular.
Yeah.
And Dan wanted to apply functional programming principles to the API design. And the way I've described it is Redux is meant to make it easier to understand when, where, why, and how your data is changing over time.
Right.
What event occurred in my app? What data was attached to the event? How did my state change in response? And what was the final value that we ended up with?
Right.
And that is captured in the Redux DevTools. You have your action history log. You can see, to do added, to do toggled, to do removed, and you can see the contents of the action objects. You can see the diff of the state. You can see the final state. To a certain extent, the actual literal time travel part, where you can actually kind of undo actions and pretend maybe I didn't click the add button or something, has always been underused. But even just literally clicking on an action and seeing the results, or even the stack trace of where it came from, is huge.
I remember the first time I saw that level of dev tooling available for the state management in an application, and I was just my brain was exploding and just kind of imagining all the different times in my career where I would have loved that, you know what I mean? And all of that time that I spent wasted where I didn't have that, and now the fact that that exists, and just kind of the next generation of what that unlocks for just me personally and my kind of developer journey was huge. And so
one of the other great things about it is Redux raised the bar. React and Redux raised the bar for what developer tooling a library or framework had to have.
Yeah.
Backbone and Ember and Angular really didn't have, from everything I've seen, any real good equivalents. I've seen a couple little extensions, but they weren't very good.
Yeah.
And starting with the React and Redux, every framework now has to have something equivalent. Vue has great dev tools today. Angular does. I know Svelte does. I'm guessing Solid does probably.
Well, you're right, and also for me personally, I'm a big GraphQL advocate. I love GraphQL, and a lot of the GraphQL client libraries as well have their companion dev tools piece as well.
React Query has something similar.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the person who took Dan's initial DevTools prototypes and built that into the extension that we know today did it in a way that it exposes a global API that is actually not Redux specific. And so many other non-Redux libraries like NGRX and Jotai and ZooStand are actually able to also connect to the same browser extension and show their data.
Oh, wow.
And so it literally made everything better for the entire ecosystem.
Wow, that's insane. That again, it's like for me and obviously like for you, the viewers, you've obviously hopefully watched a few of these videos by now, and you know how much I'm excited by things like this, by elevating communities, by elevating people, by making things easier, by making things more accessible, and this story, this journey, and kind of doing that at the scale at which Redux and which Redux DevTools has done that really unlocked and kind of really set the standard for the industry is remarkable. So I think I've said remarkable 3 times, 4 times. I guess leave a comment how many times I said remarkable in this, because he is Mark after all, and so I think he's remarkable Mark now. Nice. And so I think that was a Ned Flanders level joke right there. So you're sorry, not sorry. Anyway. That's amazing. So is that what kind of drew you to the next stage in your career now? So working at Replay.
Yep. So after 13 plus years at Northrop, I made the decision over Christmas break to finally look for something new. And I talked to a bunch of companies over the first couple of months of this year, and Replay was the only one that really, truly got me excited. I could have found other things, and I'm sure I would have been, reasonably happy with other things, but Replay just really seriously excites me for a whole bunch of reasons.
And before you continue with that thought, for 1 second, essentially, I just got a demo of Replay just now. So Mark and also the CEO Jason, who's actually sitting just over there. they gave me a demo of what they've been working on, and I have to say, like, I've never seen anything like that. Again, it was like kind of a similar kind of moment for me, kind of seeing Redux dev tools and kind of imagining where has this been on my developer journey. Seeing that now is kind of like where has this been my whole developer journey? I think you showed me a demo of replay debugging
debugging a Redux app.
Debugging a Redux app. And so if like for those of you that aren't yet familiar with replay, essentially
Elevator pitch time. So replay is a time traveling debugger for JavaScript. So we're all familiar with the debuggers in our browser dev tools, Chrome and Firefox. With Replay, you download our fork of Firefox at the moment. We've got some Chrome capabilities as well. You open up your app, press the record button, use the app for a couple minutes, hit save, uploads to our cloud. You go and log in and select the recording. And what you see in your browser appears to be the Firefox developer tools as an app, because it actually is the Firefox DevTools code as an app. And at that point, you can start with your normal debugging, like pause, breakpoint, step forward, except that you can actually pause at any point in the timeline of the recording. And so again, you can pause and step forward. You can also literally step backwards as well. But when you start looking at the source code, you can like hover over a line of code. It'll tell you how many times that line of code ran. But then you can actually add print statements attached to a line after the fact while you're debugging this recording, and it will print out what it would have printed every time that line of code ran.
Yep.
And this becomes amazingly powerful because you've got both of the standard developer tools, step debugging and console logging, and you can use them in conjunction with each other. And when you see that this line of code was hit 27 times, you can pick any one of those, jump to that point in time, do the step debugging, inspect the variables, see the DOM, look at the React component tree, all these capabilities to inspect what actually happened in the code.
And like I have to say, for me, I've heard this elevator pitch a few times, and it sounds amazing. It sounds
good, but seeing
really
is
cool,
believing.
But when I just saw it just now, it was a whole other ballgame. It was like where has this been all my developer journey? So I'm looking forward to kind of you seeing it and you kind of experiencing it yourself, and having that same kind of like mind-blowing experience that like I just had. And
so can I talk about the new thing?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Okay. So I joined Replay about a month and a half ago. I spent my first month just doing code base cleanup, trying to improve some of our Redux code, and just learned how the code base works. It is actually a React plus Redux application, just not your usual CRUD app. And so what I've been working on for the last couple weeks, we already have React component DevTools integration. So just like in your browser, you can pause inside the recording and see what the React components looked like at that point in time, inspecting their state and props and the hierarchy. So what I was working on was trying to do the same thing for the Redux DevTools. And there were two pieces. One is that we have to add chunks of the actual extension code into our special version of Firefox so that when your app is being replayed in the cloud, your app thinks it's feeding the actions data to the extension, except we're actually capturing it and saving it alongside the recording data. So then when you open up the recording and are actually debugging it, we can send the captured list of Redux actions up to the client, and the client can show those using the real Redux DevTools extension UI, so that as you're paused halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, whatever, it actually shows all the Redux actions that were dispatched up to that point in time. And literally just like an hour ago, we saw the first evidence that this really does work with a production build of our program, and not just on my development machine.
And I was one of the first people ever to see that. And so again, this is what just like made my mind explode, and made me super excited to kind of see the next generation, the next evolution of developer tooling. Because I mean, fundamentally, we can all benefit from it.
And the thing is, like this will actually hopefully have an impact on my own debugging workflow on a daily basis. So, like I said, we use Redux in our client, and there's been times when I wanted to see how is our own app's Redux state changing over time, and we do actually have the extension hooked up, so I can use that on a local build. But there's times when we use replay to debug replay on a daily basis. And there's been times I made a recording and I wanted to see how the Redux state was changing. And I've just had to find a random Redux connected component and put one of those print statements inside like the use selector or map state, just because I know that the state goes through that function every time. So in theory, I should now be able to use the Redux DevTools extension integration that I just built to help build the app that I'm also working on.
Now he's just showing off. I mean, but like again, once you see it yourself, you will understand why we're so excited about this. Like I'm not the type to like promote or like toot the horn of any particular project. That's not me. That's not my style or anything. But once I was shown how this worked, I was just legitimately so excited. I just wanted to kind of share it all with you. So
that's been my reaction. This is why I joined the team in the first place. Like, yes, I am now biased because I'm an employee and I work for it, but I would not have joined if I didn't think this was an incredibly valuable tool that has the potential to literally change how developers work on a daily basis.
It's going back to everything that you just talked about. It's really observing those trends, observing those patterns within the technical communities, observing that developers spend a lot of time debugging their applications. Applications are complicated. Managing that state and kind of using that to kind of generate a UI it's a tricky problem. And time travel debugging and all of that you kind of learned through Redux and so on and so forth is really coming into play here again with replay. So
like in a lot of ways, like much of my career has led me to this point. I actually gave a presentation last year on how to debug. Like I was talking like the mindset, the kind of like the scientific approach of like having an idea how this is supposed to work, observing to see how it is behaving, determining what's different. And replay by itself won't magically make you a better debugger. Like the debugging has to come by experience, but at the same time, by providing better tools so you can understand what's going on, it makes the process of debugging a lot easier. And we honestly think it can help teach people how to debug properly because of the different capabilities the tool has.
So like what's next for you? So are you going back to Ohio now? Are you speaking at another conference? Are you going somewhere else?
So I've been here in what city? Oakland for the last few days. Going back to Ohio tomorrow. Actually back to working on things on Monday. Like I said, it looks like at this point all the Redux DevTools stuff is working. It's a version 1. We have a bunch of ideas for improving the UI, tying the Redux data kind of into the timeline of the rest of the things that happen to the app, the clicks and the selections and all those sorts of things. So there's a lot more iteration we can do on the feature, but at least that first foundational capable functionality is in there. Honestly, like the next thing I'm probably going to work on after this is just more code base cleanup. And I have no problem sharing the dirty laundry here. Our code base is entirely, our client code base is 100% open source. You can see you can see all the PRs I've filed. You can drop into Discord and like see the daily running narrative threads where I'm talking about what I'm working on. Please. drop by and say hi.
And we'll make sure to post a link to that down in the description below, such that in a few months from now, by the time this is actually released, you can actually go back. You can actually time travel back in time and see all those PRs that Mark has filed, and hopefully you'll actually start, being able to see and use all these things. I think the beta is public. I think anyone can go.
Our application is not even beta. Like it is truly live in production, and the way it works is anybody can use it. It is free for individuals and open source projects. We are a company, we would like to make money. And so the business model is simply charging seat licenses for small or large companies per active developer on a monthly basis. Like if you've got a QA team that needs to record them, but you've only got a couple of developers debugging, like anyone can do the recording, and it's the developer licenses that you're paying for.
Yeah.
So simple, obvious business model to actually try to make money while, also helping people.
I love it. Well, make sure to go check them out. Like, make sure to use Replay. Go take a look at for yourself, and hopefully you'll have that kind of similar mind-blowing experience that I just had right now. And again, thank you so much, Ned. It's been a pleasure talking to you and kind of seeing you essentially outside of your cartoon form. So anyway, without further ado, Mark Erikson, thanks so much once again.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, we'll see you later, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.